When I was in 3rd grade, I went to live with my grandparents. That was the best place I lived. My grandpa, Papa, took me everywhere. I remember one night, I asked Papa the definition of sex. And the next day, he gave me a book on the subject. I learned all about how fish spawn.
I guess all we instructed you as much as we knew about it. We're ready to watch this first reel.
Okay. I guess you could say it all started after my mom died. This going back, trying to piece it all together. Maybe it was enough time had finally passed, or the grief. Something stirred up all the old unanswered questions, the stuff I just put out of my mind as long as she was still alive. But it was Papa who really got me going. Although I'm sure he had no idea what he was getting me started on when he asked me to come out and help him sort through his old boxes of film. He took these pictures near his home in northeastern New Mexico. I remember he always had some kind of camera handy.
When I went to Philmont, we wanted to get some game pictures. And of course our thought was to develop a movie, a little film of a few minutes that they could, we could send around to troop meetings and things, of which we actually did.
But it wasn't the wildlife that I remembered. Whenever any of us grandkids went to visit, we always wanted to see ourselves in the movies. I was one of his leading ladies.
I think we helped show you off. After all, you were our first grandchild.
And that's not all I found stashed in the back of Papa's closet. There were pictures of my dad growing up and my Aunt Linda. I guess I should have known that Pop had been documenting holidays and travel trips long before I came along.
It's like some people never get tired of golf or tennis or swimming.
You love to travel?
I just love to travel, yes. And it is true that since the very first, my first job, from then on, it has been a lot of travel.
That's Mom.
Mine and Laura.
That must have been right after they were married. Newlyweds. My parents? I've always wondered.
I think that Karen's questions probably could have been answered 25 years ago.
Well, it's been longer than 25 years.
There you are. There's your mother.
In my earliest memories, Mom was always singing. We even made up songs together. Simple ones. Just making noises with the roosters. Looking at these pictures, it's hard to imagine there was anything wrong with my mom. Of course, Papa still didn't want to talk about it.
I'd prefer that fewer people knew about our internal problems.
This is the problem Papa'd never wanted to talk about. It just didn't fit his image.
I had met one or two field executives for the Boy Scouts, and I got in with that group, and I enjoyed scouting as a Boy Scout and as a leader, and I liked to camp, and everything just seemed to point. And the first thing I knew, I had a job as a Scout executive.
Standards were high living with a full-time Boy Scout, but it's had its share of opportunities, too.
In 1943, I was very anxious to get a picture of a bear. It was reported to me that there was a bear right back over here in the plum patch. And so I alerted some of the folks, ran to get my camera, and about 25 women and children showed up with pots and pans to beat on, and I was getting right back out into here with my camera, thinking that when the bear got scared, he would come right back up towards the mountains and I'd be able to get a good picture. But you know, that bear got confused. And when the noise all came, instead of coming my way where I could get a big picture, he went right down through this group of women and children. You've never heard so much screaming. I was left out here without any picture to take of the bear, and the bear headed down to the road and right on up the street towards the camping headquarters. And that is the one time folks really laughed at me around here about my effort to get a picture of the bear. That's about it.
Papa wasn't much for psychological discussions, but he was strong on historical fact. And I found out from him that his parents had been among the last of the pioneers.
Now that's a lineup, isn't it?
I like to think of myself as a sophisticated city girl now, but my roots are nothing but country. Even so, I never would have guessed that Papa had lived in a dugout when he was a boy.
It certainly was a different lifestyle, and people didn't know any better, many of them. If you take today, living in where we can take a shower every day and put you back in that, it'd be real hardships. This might have been a wild goose chase, but we found an area here where the ground is soft and it shows some indications of where the old dugout was located, which we dug here and built in 1908. This dugout was about 4 feet underground and 4 feet above the ground, and furnished a living quarters for our whole family as we lived out here on these prairies of New Mexico. Well, Dad always said this was a country where you could see farther and see less than any other place he'd ever been. He also said it was a spot where the wind pumped the water and the cows cut the wood.
What does that mean?
Papa tried to explain what it was like living out where the nearest well water was over a mile away. I can't imagine what it must have been like for my great-grandmother raising 3 little kids out there. It's a wonder she didn't go nuts.
Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Sometimes it feels like this world's gone crazy. And Grandpa, take me back to yesterday, when the line between right and wrong didn't seem so hazy.
Wow. This is a picture, of course, of Dana Mae and I soon after we were married.
Well, that's really an old picture.
Well, she wanted to get married, and I told her she'd have to wait till she was 18. Isn't that right? That's about all there was to it.
Did you say yes right away, Grandma, when he asked you?
No use waiting around.
No use waiting around?
He didn't talk me into it. I talked myself into it.
I don't remember when I proposed to her. It must have been by correspondence.
Oh, so that's it.
Yeah.
I found evidence that he dated other girls before. Lots of them.
Oh, yes, I always had girlfriends.
That is until he met Dina Mae. and there was no doubt in her he'd met his match.
All the little things that she used to do, I'm now doing. She used to run a lot of errands and maybe help me pack my suitcase and do the things that kept me going.
The doctors called it Alzheimer's disease. Mostly it affected her short-term memory and her temperament.
Is that good, Grandma? No, it's terrible. This is not what I like to go through.
She certainly didn't like me following her around with a camera.
I don't have any choice here.
So I bribed Grandma with Cokes to see if I could get her to talk.
I don't think she can hear you. Crazy, crazy.
I was looking for the female perspective to our family history, and her memory of the distant past was still pretty clear.
The trouble with me and all this stuff is that I don't care about what happened way back. And that's terrible. But that's the way I feel. I think people should be dwelling with the life right now and the things that come up and so forth, and forget all these things that you can't solve and couldn't solve. It's a little big on you.
You think so? Or is it too
I
big?
know so.
Or is it too big?
All over.
Grandma was right. She wouldn't give me her address either. But once I'd started, I couldn't stop from looking for the clues to the secret that had plagued us all. From all indications, my dad had an idyllic childhood. As a young adult, he jumped on the fast track of a brand new high-tech industry, changing tubes inside a UNIVAC computer. He was marked for success. There were never any real problems until after 10 years of marriage, he and my mom got divorced.
Well, we didn't hold it against him. The only thing of it is we were against a divorce.
But Dad hadn't been the one who'd filed for divorce. It turns out Mom was pressured into it by her parents, the Parvins.
Yes, yes.
I don't know that I ever laid it on to anybody, but I could talk freely to your dad about it. So.
The thing was just, I don't explain it. It's frustrating, and it was, I will describe my personal feelings as being devastating.
Poor Dad. He became the scapegoat for all that had gone wrong. It took a good 25 years before he and Papa were on friendly terms again. Then they were on the phone together every day. Dad was helping Papa publish his latest history book. This book marks the 50-year anniversary of the summer scouting programs out at Philmont. Much of it's first-hand information. After all, Pop had been there from the beginning. This gave us a perfect excuse to make the trip up into the Sangre de Cristo Mountains again. This ranch was the mythic home of my father's childhood, and for me, the trip was a kind of pilgrimage to a place that had always been magic in my dreams.
Maybe he'll like that. I hope he does.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I'm glad to see all you fellas. Another year or two, you can come back here. Trek.
I figured this was the point of our journeys, a grand reunion celebrating triumphant results. I had a real-life happy ending planned.
Well, you folks come on too.
But as it turned out, nobody in the family showed up but me. They couldn't have known what they were missing. Papa showed me how cows cut wood.
Well, this is a very good example of a good cow chip. We used to run along with a wagon, throw this, we'll get a whole wagon load of them, and take them and pile them out on the wood pile. They make good fires, and that was all we had to burn in the early days. This is a perfect example of a cow dropping. It's had a day or two, a chance to dry out. See, if it's too green, why, you couldn't pick it up. But after it dries out a little, you can handle it safely. So called cow chips. The bear went over the mountain, the bear went over the mountain, the bear went over the mountain to see what he could see. The other side of the mountain, the other side of the mountain, the other side of the mountain was all that he could see.
Why did he go do that?
I really don't know. You can see me wiggling my toes.
It was Papa's health we'd all been worried about, but it was Grandmother who died. And after her funeral, Aunt Linda and my cousin Terry and I cleaned out the house to get it ready for sale. I found one more box of film, stashed in the back of a closet, I'm sure forgotten. One more box I hadn't seen. The brick looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. It could have been a location from somebody else's life. Until I saw this. It's my parents' wedding. Aunt Linda said my dad was crazy about my mom, and even if he'd known the truth, he probably would have married her anyway.
Well, we just thought she was a nice little country girl, you know. Of course, we were not in favor of getting married. Parents never are. We told him he was too young, but young people always know more than their parents when it comes to things like that.
When Dad's career began to take off, we were transferred to different parts of the country every year or two. The isolation was all considered routine. Kennedy called it the new frontier. But not all varieties transplant very well, and I think it took its toll on my folks.
Go ahead.
Again, it was the way people felt about divorce, and you didn't talk about your troubles at home. You know what I'm saying? Not even to friends and family.
I think the big tendency that we all have is to kind of rock along, hope things will work themselves out without you being too involved in it. It's always better when people can work out their own problems. The first thing that I noticed was when we went up to see you folks in when you were living on Long Island.
Well, it just wasn't a good way to be living. You could just tell it. We just knew that it wasn't right.
There were a lot of little things that, for instance, she didn't drive the car to take you kids to the doctor and things like that. Mine had to come home and do it. I said to Laura, well, you got to learn to operate on your own on this thing because mine was going to be busy. And so Dina May kind of got after me.
Time you do cooking and laundry and everything there is to do and then move every 10 minutes, it's rough.
Well, we were just year-round. I was running errands here and there. I still was working at the time. I had other things that had to be done. But I don't think I really noticed it going on. At least not to the extent that Dad did. And at the time, it didn't really bother me. And it didn't bother me until Papa talked to me about it. And then he said, this is the last time we're coming to visit. And then it hit me, you know.
Well, I told him, I said, yeah, we're not coming up here to see you and put all this load on to Laura. I wasn't thinking about, he probably took it another way.
Could it be it was all just a misunderstanding?
Laura just wasn't able to handle a family.
I don't think I really had a way out at the time. I just got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. I don't think your mother did. So, I guess the best way to put it was a separation. She took Scott and headed for Dallas. I bundled you two up because your mother couldn't take care of you. Didn't want to take care of you. Okay? And I took you the only place I could think of.
You did stay with us for a year, didn't you? Whole school year. Uh-huh.
And that was the most incredible year. It had something to do with my age. I was just coming into self-awareness.
Look like pretty big boots for a little girl, don't they?
Gosh, I loved those boots. I was properly outfitted and returned to the ranch world of my early years. And in town, my social life blossomed. Grandmother made sure I'd learn my hostessing skills. But the good times didn't last long. The sheriff showed up with my mom and her dad and hauled us back to Dallas.
So that was a pretty difficult time for all of us. First divorce we'd had in our families immediately. We knew anything about it.
The biggest question on my mind, for all us kids really, was I normal? Mom had taken shorthand so she could get a good job, and she always managed to look sharp. But she wasn't happy. Maybe she'd never been really happy. And I wondered what had happened to her.
See, we didn't know that your mother had had any problem before till when she had to go to hospital after you moved back to Dallas. Yeah.
You know, what's interesting now is that all the time we were together, in 10 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think on 5 occasions, all right, twice where I came home and she just wasn't there. And the other 3 times where she said, I just want to go visit, I want to go home, you know, to visit for a couple of weeks. Well, apparently, what I didn't know then and what I know now, is that they would put her in the hospital. They never, ever told me that. And I'd always noticed that she'd come back from her little stints.
Right.
That she would be just fine for months, for several months. So I figured, well, you know, going home to a mother, rest and relaxation must be doing some good.
What did they do to her in the hospital?
I'm sure they gave her shock treatments.
And that made her fine?
All I can tell you is she was different, you know.
When I was growing up, I was instructed not to talk about it. For the longest time, I was really angry with my family for keeping this big secret. But I cooperated. I didn't want my friends to know. I didn't even tell Papa and Grandma how bad it got.
That's why I brought you along, to open the gate and close the gates for me.
Okay. Look out.
But one thing I always looked forward to were the visits from Papa and Grandma. And the summer I was 12, they took me on again, and we took the big trip.
It really was a big trip. I'd always wanted to do it, but that was in '67.
It was probably a few more years before I knew why Mom was always going to the hospital. She told me, she said she heard voices. They said she was schizophrenic. It's a mystery what could push a person that way. It's such a fine line between a vivid imagination and madness. But I finally realized how deep it ran. Even Mom, especially Mom, kept the secret. Only one thing's certain. It was the act of keeping the secret and the shame surrounding the secret that hurt us all the most. After the divorce, I wasn't allowed to see my dad except on rare occasions.
We were right back to Dallas again. You remember that particular time? It's right there at that North Park.
We always had to meet in neutral territory, and Papa and Grandma served as the go-betweens.
You remember that motel there where we used to stay?
Dad said he wanted custody, but that's not the way it worked.
And of course, what did to your dad was that it really was hard on him. It was very lonely, and probably the reason that he got married.
That's Marie. And they had another family. And over time, we've all gotten to know each other, and the separateness is smoothed out little by little.
You can't afford to carry these things with you all your life. I think you have to be careful about dwelling too much on the past, especially if it's your problems you're thinking about, because they'll stack up on you.
That was one of my last conversations with Papa. He died just 3 months after Grandma, on May Day. It's so clear how much of that wonderful stoic attitude was the source of his strength as a man of the West. Yet when I remember my mother, I don't want to be stoic, I want to know more. So I continue to explore the world on my own, and Papa travels with me in memory, sometimes even leading the way.
I want to take you to a place you haven't been before.
Grandpa,
It's a high country road.
everything is changing fast. We call it progress, but I just don't know. And Grandpa, let's wander back into the past and then paint me the picture of long ago. Did lovers really fall in love to stay? Stand beside each other, come what may? Was promise really something people kept? Not just something they would say and then forget? Did families really bow their heads to pray? Did daddies really never go away? Oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Oh, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days.
Well, here's a good cow chip right here. That's perfect there.